Valley Railway's summer operating season was in full swing, but despite the hot summer weather, not all trains were running efficiently. Di tried his best, but on some days he struggled to catch his breath. A poor shipment of coal to the line had left him struggling on the steep slopes of the Penwyth Valley, even causing him to have to stop for a blow-up on several occasions, much to the annoyance of the passengers. As the summer sun dried out the landscape, line-side fires were becoming more common, and the volunteers would frequently find themselves stopping the train out of course to put them out. These line-side fires, combined with the bad press from Mr. Stovolds' altercation with Smith & Sons, had created a bad atmosphere amongst the local townspeople. During a newspaper interview, Smith & Sons had claimed that they had been targeted by Mr. Stovold, and that he had attacked them in retaliation for starting a rival company. Smith & Sons had exploited the situation to their advantage, and many passengers were now boycotting the railway in support of the bus company. A few weeks after the car park altercation, Mr. Stovold was released on bail. This incident had left him feeling very bitter. However, he was glad to resume his duties as company chairman.
It's great to have you back, Mr. Stovold.
You got off pretty lightly, in my opinion. What changed Magistrate's mind?
The Magistrate? Jeff? Me and Jeff go way back. We were both prisoners of...
Wait, what?
Prisoners of war?
You never mentioned this to us.
Forget I said anything. It's not important.
You know, I would love to hear some of your war stories, Mr. Stovold.
Said, just drop it, alright?
Mr. Stovold walked briskly away, and seemed very upset indeed.
What's wrong? What did we say?
Just leave him be, Mr. Dibdin. Men like him have suffered enough. Let's all agree to never bring this subject up again. Is that understood?
Yes, Mr. Davies.
Yes.
I understand.
The next day was a tough one. Di had spent the entire day struggling for steam, and on the final run back to Landiadog, his firebox was so clinkered up, Mr. Dibdin had to call Leslie to the rescue. As Di was shunted into the shed, he felt a cold rush of air passing through his tubes as his fire went out for the last time.
I cannot believe how poor this coal is.
I just couldn't breathe today, Mr. Dibdin. I couldn't breathe.
I know. We have another shipment coming in a few days. Hopefully that'll be better.
Most of it's coming out of his funnel. Do you see how many cinders he chucked out coming up from Penwyth this morning?
His smoke shouldn't be as thick as it is. You can see the coal isn't burning properly, even with the blower on. It's burning thick and black.
I hope that this new coal's better. I've had enough of putting out line-side fires.
So have our passengers.
Mr. Dibdin, I've had an idea.
Yes, Ian?
Why don't you go to Penwyth Colliery and get some?
Oh, don't be so silly, Ian.
I'm being serious, Mr. Edmondson. There was always a few tons of good steam coal sat next to the lift house. We always kept the old steam water pump as a backup for the diesel pumps. I'm sure there would be a few tons there that we could use.
Black coal's been there for years. It'll never burn now.
Yes, it will. You mark my words, Mr. Edmondson. It will burn.
Well, how would we get it here?
Well, I could go take a couple of wagons and collect it.
Oh yeah, so you're going to make us shovel it in by hand, eh? I don't think so.
Just as they were talking, Mr. Stovold arrived in his car and walked through the yard to meet the engines.
Good evening, gentlemen. Mr. Davies, are you busy right now?
No, we've been busy getting Di back from Pantygassog, but I'm free now.
I received an urgent telephone call. I need to speak to you right away.
Oh, very well.
Let's go to the station.
An urgent telephone call?
I don't like the sound of that.
Do you think he's okay?
Come on, we should go too.
Mr. Davies headed to the station building and met Mr. Stovold waiting outside. Good evening, Mr. Stovold.
Ah, Mr. Davies, there you are.
You wanted to see me?
Yes. I received a very interesting telephone call. It was from the Bristol Channel Steam Packet Company. They have a passenger ship coming in tomorrow morning. It was due to arrive at Penwyth, but there's a problem. Another ship had an accident. They collided into the pier.
I know that pier. It's very old.
Yes, and now it's damaged from the accident and won't be ready to use tomorrow. They've asked us for our assistance. They realise it's very last minute, but they have promised to make it worth our while if we can help.
Assistance? How can we assist?
Well, their contingency plan is to dock the ship here in Llandeardog. The passenger berth just behind the station is in good condition. Just the passengers need to get their connecting trains from Newport and Cardiff, so British Railways have chartered a boat train for the job. So the plan is this. When the train arrives, we need to take it from Blaenbarris to Llandeardog, pick up the passengers, and then take it to Blaenbarris, where British Railways will take it on to Newport and Cardiff.
Wait, hold up a second. Are they supplying an engine for this?
An engine?
Yes, an engine.
No, I'm afraid not. Their chartered train will terminate at Blaenbarris, and then we're on our own. British Railways won't allow their locomotives on our rails anymore.
So, Di will have to do it. How many coaches is it?
Do you promise not to get angry?
No, I do not.
Please promise me, Mr.
How many coaches, Mr. Stovold?
13?
13? 13 coaches? Gordon Bennett.
Mr. Davies, Di can't manage 13 coaches. He can barely manage 4.
Have you seen our passenger trains lately, Mr. Stovall?
No, I haven't. I've been in jail, Mr. Dibden.
Right, sorry, but let me explain. Di hasn't been coping well with this poor quality coal. He can hardly manage 4 coaches as it is.
Oh, come on, Mr. Edmondson. He's a 7F for Drake's sake.
It's not his size, Mr. Stovall. It's the coal that's the problem. The coal we're burning right now is appalling. It's not good steam coal at all.
Well, we won't get any better coal tonight, even if we could afford another delivery. Which we cannot, by the way. Nobody would deliver it for us. No. I'm afraid we'll have to call it off, Mr. Stovold.
But think of the money, Mr. Davies. That's a lot of money we'd be throwing away.
And good press.
God knows we do need some positive press right now.
What other choice do we have, Mr. Stovold?
Well, it's too good an opportunity to just give up. There just has to be a way. You adapt and overcome. That's what you told us, right, Mr. Davies?
Yes, I did. Mr. Edmondson thought for a moment, and remembered what Ian had told him about the coal at Pennyog Colliery.
Mr. Davies, I think I may have had an idea.
Ian's suggestion was put forward, and with no other options available, Leslie set off into the setting sun, hauling the railway company's first official freight train behind him. Luckily for Leslie, it consisted of one mineral wagon and the brake van. Mr. Davies and Mr. Stovold stayed behind to make the arrangements with the ship's agent, whilst Mr. Dibden and Mr. Edmondson led a gang of volunteers to collect some coal for Di. When they arrived, Mr. Julian was sceptical.
So what makes you think this coal is any good?
Ian says it's good, it's local steam coal too, so it's worth a try, right?
I suppose.
Put it this way, anything is better than that muck we've been burning at present. Di's firebox needs to be scraped every single night, and his smoke box is overflowing with ash by lunchtime. If we're going to stand any chance tomorrow, we need to make sure Di has a good supply of quality coal.
There it is.
The volunteers found the coal. Mr. Dibden sighed unhappily.
So, basically, we have to shovel it from there into this wagon by hand.
Yes.
By hand.
Yes.
As in, with shovels.
Yes.
And labour.
Yes.
How much do we need?
Well, we need to fill Di's tender, and have some spare. Let's fill this wagon, and then we know if we have enough for tomorrow.
Again, by hand.
Again. Yes.
With shovels.
Yes, Mr. Dibden, with shovels.
You do know I'm over 60 years old, right?
Yes. Me too.
Oh, come on, you old farts. Stop gassing and let's get on with it.
It's easy for you to say, young scallywag.
I hope that this is worth the effort.
It will be, Mr. Edmondson. Ian knows what he's talking about.
Right then, let's get to work.
The volunteers worked on into the night, and using nothing more than shovels, buckets and elbow grease, they filled the wagon to the brim with good quality steam coal. Once they were finished, Leslie pulled the triumphant volunteers back to Landiadog whilst they slept in the brake van. Mr. Davies and Mr. Stovold had already lit Dye's fire and steam was raising, and as Leslie's train rolled into Landiadog, the sun was rising and daylight was breaking. You made it just in time.
Okay lads, let's get Dye loaded up. Mr. Julian?
Yes?
I think we're going to need some of your famous and simply fabulous bacon sandwiches this morning.
Coming right up.
The volunteers took it in turns to shovel the coal from the wagon into the tender, and soon Dye felt a nice warm glow inside his boiler as the Welsh steam coal burned brightly. He suddenly felt optimistic about the challenging day ahead of them. A few hours later, Dye was in steam and ready to roll. As the volunteers munched on their bacon sandwiches, both Dye and Leslie were coupled together.
Why do I have to be dragged?
Because I can go much faster than you, Leslie. We need to get these coaches as quickly as possible.
I'm not happy.
No?
No, I'm not happy. I hate being dragged, and I suppose you'll be doing all the work later too. I'll just be dragged along behind again.
Come on, Leslie, we have to work together this morning. Are you both ready? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. Now, lads, you need to go to Blindberris. The coaches from the boat train will be waiting for you. Dye, I want you on the front, and Leslie, you will push from the back.
Well, that figures.
There is still a turntable at Banberris, Mr. Davies. Could we turn him before we come back?
Only if you have time, Mr. Edmondson. Now you best be off. Right away, driver. Mr. Edmondson climbed into Dye's cab.
Well, Matthew, here goes.
Dye puffed forward, dragging Leslie behind him. Dye rushed along the line as fast as he could. He felt elated. He had plenty of steam in his boiler, so much so that Mr. Dibdin had to hold him back. They rushed through every station along the line, and soon enough they were rolling into Penwyth Junction. The signals were against them, and Mr. Dibdin went to see the signalman.
Good morning, sir. We're here to pick up the boat train.
Right you are. You will cross the main line, and the boat train is waiting for you in platform 2.
Aye, aye.
Good luck. Don't dawdle when crossing the main line. I've got a high-speed express due in soon.
The signalman returned to his box, and then the signal turned green. Mr. Dibdin opened the regulator, and Dye puffed forwards. This was his first venture off the Penwyth Valley Railway since he had been restored to steam. As Dye trundled slowly forwards, his wheels rolled across the set of points that led to the South Wales main line. With every stroke of his pistons, Leslie bounced backwards and forwards against his buffers. Dye puffed hard as they headed up the steep bank out of the tunnel. On the other side of the main line, Dye saw the remains of Blindberris Motive Power Shed. It had been closed a year earlier and was already looking derelict. As Dye rolled towards Blindberris Station, the town itself looked deserted. They cautiously crossed the main line, and Mr. Dibdin brought them to a stand just past the main signal gantry. The signalman knew they were coming, and kindly set the points for them to back down into the motive power depot. With steam on the western region gone for good, the days of turning engines on the turntable were over, and the yard foreman had locked the turntable out of use. As they approached Blindberris North Box, the signal was against them, and Mr. Dibdin brought them to a stand.
We need to get Di turned. Can you switch the point, please?
Right you are then.
Mr. Edmondson spoke to the signalman and obtained the turntable key. It had been a long time since he had an engine going into the depot. The signalman gave them permission to continue into the depot. As they approached, the yard felt abandoned. The grass was getting long and growing up between the sleepers. Leslie was left in a siding, and Mr. Dibdin carefully rolled Di onto the turntable. The turntable creaked and moaned as it took Di's weight. As he came to a stand, Leslie spoke up again.
It's not fair.
What isn't fair?
It's not fair. You always pull the passenger trains. It's something I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to pull a passenger train.
Well, Leslie, we don't know how it's going to go today. 13 coaches is a heavy train, you know. I'm really going to need your help today.
But you're a big, strong engine.
I'm also over 50 years old, and in major need of an overhaul, Leslie. Remember my frames? That's why I'm going to need your help today, Leslie. That's why you are here. Leslie felt bad.
I'm sorry, Di. I forgot about your frames.
That's okay, and I'll speak to Mr. Davies. I'll see how he feels about you piloting the return journey.
You will? You really mean that?
Of course. I'll ask when we get back to Landierdog. No promises though, but I will ask. Just then, Mr. Julian and Mr. Anthony started Leslie's engine, and they set off towards the coaches. They would couple up to the back of the train to assist Di when necessary. As they rolled past the long line of coaches, Leslie suddenly didn't feel so confident.
Blimey! We're supposed to pull this lot.
Leslie was rolled on into the head shunt and coupled up to the back of the train. When Di was given the road, he backed out onto the main line and was soon setting back down onto his train. Di couldn't help but smile as he approached. It had been a long time since he had been out on the main line, and he was determined to put on a good performance today, despite the issues that he had with his frames. Mr. Edmondson climbed down from Di's cab and shunted him onto the train. He then climbed in between and coupled him up, fitting the vacuum hoses and the steam heating hoses. Di began to grow impatient as Mr. Dibdin stoked Di's fire ready for the return journey back to Landierdog.
We're all set, Matthew. Brake test complete. All good, working order.
I never thought I'd ever hear those words again.
Di and Leslie were ready to go. 13 coaches was a very heavy train, especially for an engine in Di's condition.
Now Di, remember, no Horrex today, your frames are still damaged and you can't afford to...
Yes, I know. Let's just get going already.
Hold your horses, Di. We've got to wait for the signal.
They waited and waited and waited, but the signal didn't change. Di's safety valves erupted with excess steam, and Mr. Dibdin and Mr. Edmondson were growing impatient. Finally, a slow-moving freight train passed on the main line, and the signal cleared, but the delay had cost them dearly. They were behind time already. Di puffed hard, and the long train rolled across the main line. Di felt mighty as the sound of his puffing echoed between the walls of the cutting as he headed through Blindberries. Soon, they reached Penwyth Valley Railway metals, and Di felt the full weight of his 13 coaches on the drawbar for the first time.